Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbutt. I hope everyone's having a good start to the week. I know here where I am, it's been very hot the last couple of weeks with the weather. It's been nice, and I'm looking forward to summer. And I hope everyone's been able to get outside. I know I've spent a lot of time outside over the weekend and everything. So hopefully, people are just enjoying this nice weather that we have because on here out on the East Coast, it's not always that we get warm weather. So hope everyone's doing well and having a good start to the week. I have to start off by saying congratulations to my Bruins on finishing up their first playoff series and advancing and just waiting to see who they're going to play next. So that's very exciting. And I know us Boston fans are very excited for them. So that's really fun. I am pleased to announce a special guest that I have joining me this evening. He does very, very good coverage of MLB, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about his path in sports. But Danny Vietti, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I got to ask, though, what is the definition of hot weather in Connecticut?
It honestly depends, but to me, I'd say hot is 80 degrees or higher.
All right. I don't want to one-up you, but I won't get into the California weather we're having right now. Just know that we got triple digits coming up on our radar this weekend. So not looking forward to that, but looking forward to this podcast. So thanks for having me on.
I believe it. I mean, I spent a semester in LA actually when I was in college, and I loved being out there. I loved the weather. I was there for the cold months here. So January, February, March, when it was really cold here. My friends back on the East Coast were all super jealous that I was out on the beach in California in January. And I do miss that sometimes, but I do not think I would enjoy it being 100 degrees.
Oh, not looking for it. It's funny. Everyone thinks, oh, you're from California. You're going to get 80-degree weather. You're going to go spend time at the beach. The closest beach is like 3 hours away from me, and that beach is pretty chilly. So I'm basically stuck in this 100-degree heat. But it is better than the humidity over there on the East Coast, I got to say.
Yeah, the humidity is tough, and it's not really fun to deal with. But at the same time, I do not like the winters here when it gets super cold. So when it is warm outside, I try to just be optimistic and just enjoy that weather because I'm much more of a summer person than a winter person.
And your Red Sox are playing good, so it's a good time to be alive if you're living in Boston, Connecticut.
See, that's exactly how I like to think of things. There's a lot of positives for me to take out of what's going on right now, and just the fact that everything's really opening back up and getting back to normal, which whatever normal is, we were just talking about that off air before we started recording the show. It's nobody really knows what normal is anymore, but it'll be nice for the summer to be able to be more kind of people going out and doing things a lot more, especially here. So that's really exciting. And having fans in the stands at games again is super exciting because that was very strange to watch baseball last year. And it's just really nice that things are kind of starting to resume back to its normal state.
Yeah, I can't wait to go be socially awkward in public places again because we've been stuck inside for a year plus. We're going to go out there into the public and we're going to be expected to communicate with other humans, and we're not going to know what to do. So I'm very much looking forward to asking very awkward, uncomfortable questions with everyone, just kind of mess with everyone.
Yeah, it's going to be so funny because nobody knows how to interact anymore because we didn't have to for so long.
Yeah, Zoom. I've become very comfortable with Zoom. Zoom's my thing now. I can mess around with the chat, do I know all the tips and tricks now, but it's going to take a little while before I get back up the speed with regular socialization.
Yeah, I think a lot of us can say that same thing, and it's very strange because who would have thought that that's what it was going to be at the beginning of 2020? That it's just crazy what we've all endured this past year plus. So I'm just happy that there's positivity and that people have things to look forward to now, which is another thing that we lacked for a while too, and just real things to do now. And even seeing my friends for the first time after we were all locked at home was weird. So it was super nice to be able to do that. So I am hopeful that the rest of this year is going to be good, and there's a lot of good baseball left to be played. So that's really exciting too.
Yeah, just out here in California too, we just got news that the majority of the ballparks, including actually it's all of them, so Petco, Oracle, Coliseum, Dodger Stadium, Angel Stadium, so all five, they're going to be full capacity come June 15th. So I think everybody over here, at least on the West Coast, is really looking forward to, like you said, getting back to whatever normal is defined by, but getting back to whatever that is.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I know that Fenway Park is May 29th, full capacity, which is next week. Or no, that's actually this week. That's this week,
Yeah.
Upcoming weekend, actually. That's crazy. So that's really exciting. And I know that people are definitely happy about that. So things are moving in the right direction. But before we kind of get into a deeper dive on the baseball season so far, can you just start by telling people a little bit about just how you got involved in working in sports? I know that you have a baseball podcast too, as well as doing regular baseball coverage for your job. So just tell us a little bit about kind of all of that and how you got involved in working in the sports field.
Yeah, I don't want to bore anyone to sleep here, so I'll keep it short and sweet. But basically, I got my start through Max Preps when I was in college, played college baseball, and then also worked part-time with Max Preps, which is the high school sports leader. And Max Preps is owned by CBS Sports. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door and kind of made some leaps up to different jobs. Got myself in the social media department with CBS Sports, and I'm still in the social media department, but I also kind of dipped my toe in a different department. So I do editorial, which I write articles. I started doing podcasting for CBS Sports. Since then, Will Middlebrooks, the World Series champion for the Red Sox back in 2013, he's my co-host on the new Wake and Rake podcast. So I just kind of dipped my toe wherever needed, little editorial, a little podcasting, and a lot of social media as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, I'm sure you can definitely agree with this, that working in sports is such a rewarding thing because it's something that we all enjoy that we would be doing outside of our jobs as it is, just watching sporting events. And that's something that, is just a passion that I have in general. So I would be talking about sports with people as it is outside of work. So being able to make a job out of that kind of thing that I'm just that passionate about, I can't really think of anything better than that.
Yeah, and I get that question a lot is, does working in sports ruin it for you? Because like if you work at Disneyland, you don't want to go to Disneyland. Like it's like you don't want to go to your work for your free time. And I feel very fortunate because CBS Sports does not broadcast baseball. And so my job, while I write about sports and I talk about sports through podcasting and whatnot, our primary duties, at least social media wise, is not through baseball. So I still get to enjoy that aspect of it. I will say on the flip side, like March Madness is a huge deal for CBS Sports every year. And March Madness used to be one of my favorite events, still is one of my favorite events. But since we've had to cover it, it's such a grind. I mean, it's late hours. It's kind of taken away a lot of the fun that was March Madness. So there's something to working in sports. It definitely has its positives, but at the same time, there can be its negatives as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. And I mean, I used to be at ESPN doing similar stuff to you, social media type of stuff there. And there's definitely a point of, it gets to be a lot and the hours are tough and it's just a lot of hard work and certain things that you don't exactly look forward to from a work perspective, but if you weren't working, it might be different because you're super excited for those types of events. So there's definitely those mixed feelings for me too, but it's overall, I couldn't imagine myself doing anything but working in sports because that's what I'm most passionate about, and having to do anything else, I can't even really imagine or picture doing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So as you know, I had to push back this interview to today because I was doing jury duty.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but sit in this courthouse. I was sitting there all day, and I couldn't help but think like, gosh, these people have rough jobs. Like they're sitting in this dark courtroom, 9 to 5. They have to sit through traffic just to get to their office. There's no windows in this courthouse. Like you're just sitting there in the dark the whole time. And I'm like, damn, I have it pretty darn good, I think. I just couldn't help but think like, you yeah, the hours might suck with the sporting industry, but I'll trade some rough hours for a window. You know what I mean?
Yeah. See, I mean, seriously, that's got to be so depressing. But I mean, there are certain jobs that I would just never be able to do. So I'm definitely grateful that I chose a field that I know would make me fulfilled and make me happy. And I'm sure that you feel the same. And it's great that you were able to kind of break into that field too, because it's just so tough to break into the sports industry. And I know you have some great coverage and some great knowledge and some great experience. So I'm definitely looking forward to talking to you just about baseball. And it's my favorite sport. So it's fun. And it's almost June now, which is crazy because it feels like the season just started. But it's the fact that it's almost June 1st is wild to me. And there's a lot of good teams this year. But what would you say is your biggest surprise team so far that is a lot better than you expected? Because I can think of some teams that I think had a better start than people anticipated that they would have.
San Francisco is definitely up there for me.
Yep. That was great. That was my big one.
I think I was a little higher, not to pat myself on the back or anything like that. I was a little higher on San Francisco than a lot of people were coming into the season, just because I have so much faith in Farhan Zaidi, the president of baseball operations with the San Francisco Giants. Yep. That guy has a knack for just finding lightning in a bottle players like Donovan Solano, Anthony DeSclafani, Kevin Gausman. I mean, guys that have been released from multiple teams. And he picked Darren Ruff. I mean, and he picks them right up and he slots them into a slot where they're going to succeed. And, I mean, they've performed excellent. Now, I didn't think they'd be at the top of the division, which they were for the first nearly 2 months of the season. They just got swept by Los Angeles and they fell in the standings a little bit. But their starting rotation has been phenomenal all season long. And not to mention Johnny Cueto's been on the IL. Logan Webb just got put on the IL. So, I mean, they've definitely been a pleasant surprise for me, just because I don't think the ceiling is there, but they've proven me wrong so far. I mean, they've looked really good so far.
Yeah, that division is definitely going to be fun to watch for the rest of the season too. I mean, before the season started, I kind of put the Padres as the team that might come out of that division, but I think it's going to be close between those three teams, them, the Dodgers, and the Giants all season. I don't see the Giants really going anywhere. Like you said, they got swept by the Dodgers and they kind of fell, but I still see them actually being able to compete based on what they've been doing. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that division going forward, because there's some talent in that division. And, a lot of people are saying the Dodgers are going to win that division, which does make sense. I mean, they're the defending champs and they did get better in the offseason, but I mean, the Padres are also very, very good, and I think that they have a good chance of winning that division as well. So I think it's just going to be a matter of, who's going to stay healthy and can they sustain what they have going? Because if the Padres can sustain what they have, then I really do think that they have a chance of winning that division.
No, I couldn't agree more. I was asked a similar question, I think it was yesterday, and basically saying, okay, what separates the Padres from the Dodgers? And I said, frankly, I think it's just going to be a matter of who's healthier at the right time, because I think both those squads are so good. They're so stacked. They both have a ton of depth. The Padres got a little fortunate coming into that last series against Los Angeles where they took 3 out of 4. The Dodgers didn't have Cody Bellinger. That was a major loss. Earlier in the season when the Dodgers took 2 of 3 from San Diego, the Padres didn't have, the Nelson Lamet. Trent Grisham was just coming off of injury. So, they were a little banged up as well. I think later down the road, when push comes to shove, it's just going to be a matter of who's healthier at the right time. The scary thing about San Diego is they're 21st in home runs. They're 11th in batting average. Now, their pitching's been phenomenal. They're first in ERA. Their bullpen has been the best in baseball. But hitting-wise, we were expecting their lineup to be one of the best lineups in the league. It's been very middle of the pack so far, and they still have the best record in baseball. That's a scary thought in itself, because if all of a sudden their lineup starts clicking and they had that rotation that has been excellent, that's a scary combo right there.
Yeah, and their pitching was something that they needed to address in the offseason this year. I mean, that was something that we saw as a struggle last year into the postseason. And so the fact that they addressed their pitching in the offseason, I looked at that roster when everything was said and done, and I was like, yeah, this is a team that people should not sleep on. This is going to be a team that actually can seriously contend. And if, like you said, if their lineup starts to put things together, which I do think eventually they will, then that's going to be a team that's going to be very, very hard to beat. And I would have a hard time picking other teams over them when it comes to games down the stretch and even into the postseason. Maybe if they can stay healthy and everything clicks and everything is together, I would be pretty confident in picking them as one of the teams that I could see definitely maybe going to the World Series and be kind of pretty confident in that decision.
Their fourth best starter this year has been Blake Snell, who won the Cy Young a few years ago.
I know.
Situations can be a lot worse. I mean, man, I think going back to your question about surprises too, I think there's been less surprisingly good teams. I think there's been more actually surprisingly bad teams. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but Minnesota Twins really slow out of the gates.
What's going on with them?
It's been a combination of just not, very home run heavy team. Their pitching has not held up their end of the bargain. So there's been a handful of teams that have really disappointed me. Early on, the Yankees really struggled. And I hate to say they're a disappointing team because now they have one of the best records.
I liked it.
But yeah, I'm sure that doesn't break your heart. But early on, it was like, what the hell are the Yankees doing? Now, all of a sudden, news came out today that Corey Kluber is going to be sidelined for a couple months, too, with his shoulder injury. I don't know. There's been some disappointments across the league, but particularly Minnesota. I mean, things are looking really rough up there.
Yeah, and the thing about teams like them is it's very, very hard to have a home run heavy lineup and not be able to do much else. And I think we've seen that from the Yankees the last few years too, because they've had teams that they could just hit a lot of home runs and they had a lot of power hitters, but they could not do much else offensively and they weren't really versatile. And that's been something I think that's held them back too. And I think they're starting to do a little bit more of that. And they're starting to incorporate more on offense than just home runs because they've won some games lately without hitting home runs. And so I think that was something that was an issue for them. But with the Twins, I mean, they're just a team that I think everybody could say that they thought would be better than they are right now. And it's just so crazy to look at them right now and just see how much they've been struggling. And I agree with you. I think that there's been more teams that have lived not up to expectations and have just been playing worse than people thought they were going to play. But I mean, being a Red Sox fan for me, they're another team actually that going into the season, people had much lower expectations for than how they're playing right now. And I tried to tell people before the season started, I was big on saying, I think the Red Sox this year could be good enough to get a wild card spot. Did I think that they were going to be at the top of the AL East for this whole, however long month or almost 2 months now of the season? And now they're a half a game behind the Rays for first place in that division. But for me, I always thought that they were good enough to get a wild card spot. I never expected them to be in first place in the division because I don't think that they're as good as the Rays and the Yankees. But I did think that they could surprise people this year and be a good team. And a lot of people thought I was crazy for saying that. But they've been playing pretty good baseball. And I think the AL East as a whole is the best and most competitive division in baseball right now. And you're almost forced to win pretty much every day because the Yankees are starting to win a lot of games now. The Rays, I mean, their winning streak ended yesterday after winning like 11 games in a row, which is crazy. And Toronto, I still am not ruling them out either. I think that they are a very good team and there's a lot of talent over there. And I think in the future, Toronto's going to be a team that we're going to have to worry about. And whether that's this year is still to be seen. But I do think that it's going to be that division, a 3, possibly 4-team race all the way up until the end of the season.
Yeah, and up in Toronto, man, Vladdy G so far. I mean, coming into, what is today, Wednesday? Coming into Wednesday's games, first in home runs, tied for first in RBIs, first in OPS, first in slugging. I'm not talking about the American League. Like, I'm talking about all of Major League Baseball. He's first in every one of those categories. Just crushing balls, putting the team on his back. they have a lot of young talent. I think they're really ahead of schedule with Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio. They still haven't really brought up Ben Pearson. We don't really know what we're getting out of him yet. So Toronto has a really bright future. To your point, I agree. I think the American League East is the most competitive division right now. That said, I think over there in the NL West, because they're so top heavy with those three teams, Giants, Dodgers, Padres, I think as of right now, I think the best teams, if you're going to pick out single teams, would be Dodgers and Padres right now. And they're both in the same division. But they're top heavy. So for that reason, the American League East, between those four teams, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Yankees, Rays, you got four teams that should make the playoffs, but unfortunately only two or maybe three are going to end up making the playoffs. The NL East is really strange because another team that's been really disappointing is the Atlanta Braves. Now, they're starting to make some leaps and bounds now. They're starting to hit the ball a little bit better with runners in scoring position. They're, as a collective unit, they're doing a better job. Their starting rotation really had some injuries mount up. They knew Mike Soroka was going to be hurt, but then he had a setback in his return. All of a sudden, Max Fried hit the IL. Charlie Morton's not quite pitched into what they were hoping for. So Atlanta is another team that was slow out of the gates, and that entire division is really strange because I'm waiting for one of these teams, and that's the Braves, to somehow pull away. It's a very winnable division, and none of those teams seem to be pulling away, at least not early yet. So NL East, AL East, it's very it's fun to look at those differences because you have one division that's just stacked, and then there's the NL East that's like, come on, like you just want to push them forward, like take both hands and push them forward.
Yeah, and on paper, those teams in the NL East, you know, there's some talent over there too. And on paper, those should be teams that you look at and should be performing better than they are right now too. So that's a really intriguing division to me. I mean, the Braves played the Red Sox last night. The Braves won 3-1. Charlie Morton pitched. He actually looked very, very good. He had some good stuff last night, which was frustrating for me because one of the biggest issues that the Red Sox have had lately is leaving runners on base in scoring position and just not being able to drive in runs. And they had multiple opportunities to score runs, and they could have won that game if they had capitalized in those opportunities, but they just didn't. So, I mean, yes, Charlie Morton was really good, but they also, it's not like he shut them down completely. They did have opportunities to score with runners on base, and they just couldn't capitalize, and they couldn't score runs. And that's got to be the most frustrating thing to me because the Red Sox offensively are very, very good. And on any night, this offense can come out and do a lot of damage. And we've seen that this year. We've seen them come out and do a lot of damage and just put up a lot of runs offensively. And it's just frustrating when you go and you leave runners on base that are in scoring position, and you get a pretty decent start out of Garrett Richards too. I mean, he didn't have obviously fantastic stuff last night, but he was good enough where he was keeping that score low enough where they could have had opportunities to come back and win that game. And even early on in the first few innings, they could have gotten him run support that they didn't. So it's just really frustrating to me. And I'm hoping that when they play the Braves tonight, I'm hoping that things change and that they can at least take the second game of the series and just go out and just score some more runs, because that was the issue last night. And the offense isn't usually the issue with the Red Sox. It's more the pitching for me. So I guess what I wanted to ask you next is just, do you realistically see the Red Sox being able to maintain what they're doing right now? Or do you think that they're eventually going to fall pretty far back behind the Rays and the Yankees? I mean, I obviously am a little biased because I'm a Red Sox fan. And based on what I've seen so far, my answer is that they are going to have to make some moves at the trade deadline, and it's most likely going to have to be for some pitching. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are in terms of them right now, because there's a lot of mixed thoughts on the Red Sox. Some people are starting to take them a little more seriously, and some people are like, no, it's just they've just had an easy schedule. Like, they're not going to maintain what they're doing now for the whole season.
I'm sure I don't have to remind you, there's also this guy named Chris Sale who's floating out there, itching to get back. So we'll see and wait for an update there. But hopefully he returns, sometime near the All-Star break, maybe sometime after. That would be the best trade acquisition you could make near a trade deadline right there is Chris Sale. So Boston's an interesting case. Now, we talked a lot about Boston coming into the season because their over-under, I believe, according to Vegas odds, was 81.5. So you're basically saying, are they going to be a 500 team or not? That's essentially what they're asking. And I took the over. Will Middlebrooks, my co-host, took the over. And we both agreed that we believe in Chaim Bloom and his process and his ability to provide a productive lineup. Now, their offense was one of the better lineups in the league last year.
Yeah.
They didn't put together too many wins, but it wasn't the offense's fault. And not to mention, that was with J.D. Martinez hitting 215 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You're just going to need production out of your starting rotation, and they have gotten that. Nick Pavetta's been fantastic. Garrett Richards has been a little hit and miss, but overall, I think it's been pretty productive from Garrett Richards. Eddie Rodriguez has struggled a little bit, but after that, Martin Perez has been phenomenal. That's the ultimate question. Are they able to sustain? I think their offense, there's no question, are able to sustain. Look at their batting average on ball in play. They have one of the highest, but also they have one of the highest batting averages as a team, too. So it's not as if they're just getting lucky with some of these hits. Their starting rotation, if they're in this thing, to your point, come trade deadline, and Chris Sale is going to become a factor, is he going to be ready? Do they want to push him to that limit? But I'm sure they're going to look to the market to see what they can do if they can add a starting pitcher. Because is it sustainable? That's the ultimate question. I wish I had an answer for you. I don't have a perfect answer. Just my personal belief, I think they're going to be right in the thick of it. Do I see them winning the division? I still think the Yankees are the best team in that division. But, I mean, the Red Sox have proven me wrong all season long. Their offense might be better than the Yankees. If you go, player by player, it might be better than the Yankees because, to your point, the Yankees are very home run dependent, whereas the Red Sox do a better job as a collective unit, picking up base hits, hitting with runners in scoring position, whatever it may be. They do a better job overall than New York does. So I think they'll be right there in the thick of it. I don't see them winning the division, just personally, but they've proven me wrong time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, going into the season, I definitely was never saying the Red Sox would win the division. The Yankees are just, I agree with you. I do think ultimately the Yankees will win the division. And I kept telling people that even though the Yankees had a rough start in April and they weren't playing well, I kept telling people they're going to figure it out eventually. They're too talented of a team to not figure it out eventually and start playing better baseball. And they're going to be right up there with the other teams in the AL East. I mean, I do think that Tampa Bay has a chance of winning the division too if they keep playing the way that they're playing. But I do think physically the Yankees are the best team in the division right now, like best built team in the division. And I think that their championship window is kind of closing with a lot of the players that they have. So they're kind of at the point now where they are going for a championship. And so I do think that the Yankees will win the division. But if the Red Sox can stay in that mix with those teams and keep pace with the Rays and the Yankees, I do think that they have a good chance of making the playoffs and making a wild card spot. And the offense was never something I was ever concerned about. I mean, sometimes people forget how good the offense was last year just because the pitching was horrendous, for lack of a better word. And it was just a rough season because they just did not have the pitching to kind of contribute to the offensive numbers that they were putting up. And it was very frustrating, but they went and they made some moves in the offseason on the pitching side. And just looking at that, and I mean, a lot of people did not like Chaim Bloom after the Mookie Betts trade, which I understand why people were kind of freaking out over that, myself included, because when are you going to find that type of talent again? However, I do think that what he got in return are players that can really contribute. And I mean, Alex Verdugo is proving to be a really important asset to the offense right now. And, they have some young players now in the system that haven't even come up yet. So I think in terms of him coming in and having to start to do a rebuild and rebuild their farm system while also trying to be a contending team, I don't think that he's done a bad job overall at what he's doing from when he came in, because I look at their future in the next few years, and there's a lot of young talent now in their farm system that I'm excited to see come up. And so I think that they are probably good enough right now if they sustain this to be a wild card team as long as they can keep pace with the Yankees and the Rays, because again, they're in a tough division. Obviously, they're probably not going to go all the way this year. They just don't have enough right now to do that, but they're pretty set up to have a good future the next few years, I'd say.
I think you basically hit the point that I was trying to get at, in that the Red Sox are not going to beat themselves. It's more so about how competitive the division is. It's more so about the Tampa Bay Rays are the defending American League champions. The New York Yankees were expected to win the division. They're one of, according to Vegas, they had the, I believe, second or third best odds coming into the season. After that, you have Toronto, who's been as one of the best lineups in the league. Their rotation is some question marks. But I think what you were saying, I couldn't agree more, is that it's not as if the Red Sox are a bad team and they're going to beat themselves. It's more so just about this division being really tough. I will say this, though. I think the American League this year, I don't think it was expected, but I think it's much more winnable when you compare it to the National League. I think it's much more top-heavy in the National League, as I mentioned already, with the Dodgers and the Padres looking so good early on. In the American League, with the Yankees stifling out of the gate, all of a sudden Chicago now has some beef with their manager, to say the least. I think all of a sudden the American League now becomes winnable. We'll see what the season pans out, or what the season has in store for us, but I think early on, you look at the American League, I don't think there's any top dog quite right now. So until one of the top dogs emerges, I think the Red Sox certainly have a chance.
Yeah, and everyone thought that top dog was going to be the Yankees, and I think that it still could be the Yankees. I think that they are kind of in the best place right now in the American League to really go all the way and be in serious contention. However, I mean, we talked about it before. Corey Kluber, he's on the IL now, and there's always injuries with the Yankees, and that seems to hold them back every year or two. And I think that they're the type of team that they need everybody to be fully healthy if they want to contend. And I also think that their pitching is going to be a question mark too, as we've seen. Because I mean, obviously Garrett Cole is Garrett Cole, and then Kluber just pitched that no hitter, but now is injured. And then everybody else after that, I mean, Domingo Germán's been good, but then you have kind of question marks when it comes to Jameson Taillon, who I think was a question mark when they signed him in the first place. Then there's Montgomery, who's been pitching, and he hasn't been the best either. And I think their bullpen is really good. I think that their bullpen is something that is going to be sustainable pretty much all season. But their starting rotation it's just going to be a matter of health. And I've been saying that for a while. And I think if they can be fully healthy, then their rotation can be really good too. But I think that I personally think that the Yankees will make moves at the trade deadline, but I don't necessarily think it would be for pitching, because I don't think that that's what they would see as their biggest need right now.
The Yankees rotation is tough because I don't question their talent.
Yeah, me either.
That said, when you bring in, especially when you have a lineup so fragile, this was my problem with the Yankees coming in. So you have a lineup that has not proven to be able to stay on the field. Guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, phenomenal talents, haven't been able to stay on the field. Now, Brian Cashman built his rotation with injury-prone players. Jameson Taillon, 2 different Tommy John surgeries. Corey Kluber, he's pitched coming into the season. He had, I believe, 2 starts over the last 2 seasons combined. After that, Jordan Montgomery had Tommy John surgery. Domingo Germán's coming off suspension. It's a lot of question marks. Now, the rotation's been fine thus far. I mean, Corey Kluber was phenomenal, but now he's injured. I had the pleasure of talking with Jameson Taillon before this season. He said he's never felt better. His performances have been, up and down. But I think overall his stuff looks really good. You look at the StatCast numbers and the spin rate, blah, blah, blah. It's actually looking pretty promising. But for a guy coming off 2 Tommy John surgeries, it's a lot to put on one guy. It's a lot of pressure to put on Corey Kluber, who's pitched 2-3 starts in the last 2 seasons, to all of a sudden him now be your second starter. Garrett Cole's phenomenal. After that, it's tough. It's a lot of pressure to put when you have a lineup that's fragile. that is that fragile, and then you combine that with a rotation that is fragile now, I question the decision-making of Brian Cashman personally.
Yeah, that's something that I was concerned about too, because I said, this rotation is not – it's just risky. There's a lot of risks that you're taking here with this rotation right now, and there's going to be a lot of question marks. And I mean, they don't have Severino back yet either, but he's in the same situation as Chris Sale. That do we know whether he's going to be in full form when he comes back or not? You never really know until you see them pitch. And I'm hoping that we get Chris Sale back in full form and that he'll be the Chris Sale that, is the ace that we all know and love as Red Sox fans, but it's the same situation with Severino. They both, I think, are projected to come back around the same time. So it's going to be interesting to see whether those two are going to be able to come back and really pitch at a level that we remember them pitching at. And that's another thing that the Yankees have to think about too, is when he comes back, that's not a guaranteed reliable starter either right now. So I think that there's just a lot of question marks there, and there's a lot of risk being taken. And I do think that that's something that potentially could hold them back down the road, which is why I'm kind of trying to stay optimistic about the Red Sox because of all those factors that we discussed. I think that they have a chance of being able to stay with the Yankees just because I think there's less question marks when it comes to their starting rotation. You have some pretty solidified pitchers there. And I think that if this pitching is going to hold the Yankees back, then I do think the Red Sox have a chance of kind of being neck and neck with them. And they play the Yankees the next weekend, I believe it is. And that's going to be a test for both teams, really, just to see where they're at, because, the Yankees are a half game behind the Red Sox right now, and they keep pretty much winning on the same days and losing on the same days for the most part. So that's going to be a big test series, I think, to see where the two teams are at and to see what the rest of the season could look like in the AL East between those two teams.
Yeah, it could definitely be decided by the rotations. I'll say this. I think the Red Sox floor, rotation-wise, I think the Red Sox rotation floor is higher than the Yankees. I think the Yankees ceiling when it comes to their rotation is higher. The problem is the floor with the Yankees is everyone gets hurt, and all of a sudden they got to pull up all these minor leaguers. That's a realistic possibility, sadly. And Corey Kluber going down, I just really hope it's not the start of a snowball effect.
Yeah, I know. That is actually pretty unfortunate. And, you never want to wish injuries on players. And it's just an example, though, of how this has haunted the Yankees before. And it just seems to be once somebody gets injured, it ends up just being this spiral effect, like you said. And that can be that's going to be something that could be a serious problem. And I think going into the next couple months, the schedules are tough. I mean, I looked at the Yankees schedule for June and July, and they have some tough games coming up and a couple tough stretches. And I think that they're going to be seriously tested when it comes to their schedule. And I mean, the Red Sox are the same way. I mean, they have some tough games coming up too. And I think there's just going to be certain games that are going to be a serious test. And I'm excited for that first Red Sox Yankees series, because both teams are playing well right now, and it just makes the rivalry better for me when both teams are good. But I think it's just going to be fun to see how that series actually goes, because so many people are talking about the AL East right now and just how tough of a division that's going to be to win, and just how forced you are to just play well every night and pretty much win games every day, because it seems like the other teams in the division are always winning. So I think that when they do play the Yankees, that's going to be really telling for if the Red Sox are really serious and can actually really be contenders, because we know how good the Yankees are when they're playing well. And I think if they can shut down the Yankees and take 2 of 3 in that first series against the Yankees, I think from a Red Sox fan perspective, then that would give a lot of reason for optimism as the rest of the season progresses, as long as people stay healthy.
Yeah, it should be a good test. I've compared Boston to San Francisco a lot over the past couple of months because they both have very crafty general managers, and Kein Bloom and Farhan Zaidi, very crafty, very good with finances and being able to put a team together for not a lot of money. And so in that regard, I think to your point, the Red Sox are going to be tested over the next couple months, especially with the Yankees coming in and facing the Yankees. That'll be the ultimate test because we just saw last week with San Francisco, and not a whole lot of people knew whether to take San Francisco seriously. All of a sudden, the Dodgers come into San Francisco and they flatten them, 3-game sweep, and now they're going to have to find themselves once more. So it'll be a great test for Boston. Like I said, I compare Boston with San Francisco a lot, front office-wise, team-wise. And I think it's kind of funny that they're kind of colliding along the same path here.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, too. It just seems like the patterns are similar in just what those two teams are doing and the direction that they're heading in. And I also think that managing is a part of it, too, though. And I do credit Alex Cora for a good portion of the Red Sox success this season so far because of the way that he manages the team and how much of a player's coach that he is. And I don't think that every manager really has that Alex Cora has. And you can tell that a lot of the players really respect him and enjoy playing for him. And I think that the way that he communicates with his players and the way that he really, really is a player's coach, I do think that has made a difference so far in this season. So, I mean, bringing him back obviously was controversial at first among baseball fans, but I do think that he's a good match for this team in terms of what they need and what they're trying to do. And I think that the way that he communicates with his players has been a big part of how they've been able to succeed so far. And you see other teams, and when they have issues with their managers, they don't play as well. And so I think that that's something. I mean, you mentioned Chicago, the White Sox. I mean, we know what's going on there, and we see that they're not. I mean, they just got swept by the Yankees, and they're just. I think that that's very telling in terms of the Red Sox that Alex Cora is very well liked among the players, because I think that that's a really important thing when it comes to a baseball team. And when you have a long season like that and being able to keep them motivated and keep them focused, which is something that he seems to be really good at.
Yeah, that was, I don't want to say surprising, but the way the players talk about Alex Cora is very unique. Not every player talks about their manager that way. And so when they re-signed Alex Cora or brought him back to be their manager, at first, it was like, oh, they're bringing back a cheater. But then, like, you read into it, it's like, one, he served his time. So a lot of people thought it was controversial. It's like, if you're going to be mad at anybody, be mad at the league. Be mad at Rob Manfred. They're the one that gave him his 1-year suspension. Alex Cora did his time. Move on. But a lot of people were like, no, he should never manage in the league. It's like, don't put that on Alex Cora. He didn't make his suspension. He just served it. Okay, be mad at Rob Manfred if you want to, but don't be mad at Alex Cora. Alex Cora did his time. And yeah, the response from the players when that happened was very unique. And so right away I was like, man, he's doing something right, because those players really do adore him.
Yeah, well, and that's it always makes me happy to read that stuff too, because having somebody like that as your manager, I think it just says a lot and it goes a long way. And if the players are going out there and they respect their manager and they want to play for him, it shows in the way that they play. And even when they lose, they act like every loss is like they just lost Game 7 of the World Series, based on their just expressions in the dugout and just the vibe that they give after games. You can just tell how badly they want to win games. And I think going into the season, they knew that people were kind of sleeping on them, and they knew that they were a team that people were not expecting to be good. And they come out in a lot of their games and they play with the mentality that they're not out of it. And that's why we've seen them be one of those teams that can come back from behind and win games. And they have won a lot of games in that fashion. And I think overall that type of mentality is going to get them far, because they don't really give up in their games. They come out with the mindset of, we're not out of it and we can still win this game. And I think how much they want to win is just very, very important. And I think that that's something that has helped them and will help them going forward, because I don't think you find the same type of locker room mentality that they have with every team.
They have a good mix of younger platoon guys and World Series champions. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, they got rid of Mookie, Jackie Bradley Jr., Andrew Benintendi. Well, they still got Xander Bogaerts. He just happened to be the starting shortstop when they won the World Series just a couple of years ago. JD Martinez was on that team. Chris Sale is injured. Nathan Eovaldi. You got some World Series champs on this squad. Okay, now you have some other guys that they brought in, guys like, I don't know, Hunter Renfroe. Kike Hernandez, who they brought over, is also a World Series champ. But you have a good mix of individuals here. I think to your point, that's why it's been a good process so far.
Yeah, that's why I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, because I think that there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about this team. And even though this season they're probably not going to be quite up there in terms of a team that can actually compete for a World Series, they're making things fun and they're making things exciting, and they're coming out every night, and you know not to count them out of close games, because I always sit there with that feeling of like, yeah, like they're going to get that big hit soon and they're going to come back in this game, because there's a lot of reason to feel that way based on how they've been playing. And I think that that's something that they might have that even other teams in their division don't necessarily have. And I think they know that they're in a tough division, and they know that the rest of the season is going to be tough. But I think that they come out there every night and they're there to compete, and they're there to show people that they are talented and they deserve to be there. And I think, like you mentioned with Kike Hernandez and Hunter Renfroe and players like that, I think having that type of presence in the locker room in terms of the leadership. And I mean, even a lot of Dodgers fans were speaking on Kike Hernandez and just how much of a well-liked guy he was in the locker room over there, and just having his personality there. I think that that's very important. And I think he was a bit of an underrated signing among Red Sox fans, because I think that he's somebody that actually, with his personality, is really helping to motivate them for games, and just having somebody like that around.
Yeah, the whole shop laundry cart home run celebration cracked me up too. I mean, a lot of really good personalities. Yeah, I love it too, and it's good that personality is in the game and it's being celebrated. And I don't think we talked a little bit about it, but Yankees Red Sox, just that rivalry being back is huge for just the game of baseball, ratings, just more eyes on the game, because this is going to make a lot of Red Sox fans laugh. But the whole Dodgers-Padres rivalry has been gaining some buzz. And so if that's going to continue to traject upward, the Red Sox and Yankees are going to have to be right there. Now, look, Red Sox-Yankees, greatest rivalry in all sports, if you ask me. But as of right now, Padres-Dodgers, it's been pretty interesting over there on the West Coast. So I'm just warning you guys, West Coast bias people are like, look out, Yankees-Red Sox, because Padres-Dodgers are coming.
Yeah, I had somebody on Twitter recently that commented on one of my tweets that was about Red Sox Yankees. And I think I tweeted something about how if I made the MLB schedule, I would make Red Sox Yankees an opening weekend series every year, that they would just face each other to start the season every year. And somebody commented about the Dodgers Giants rivalry and how like that's just as big as Red Sox Yankees. And I was like, yeah, that I probably is from a West Coast fan base perspective. But overall, people know the Red Sox Yankee rivalry more. Do you know what I mean? And I think that the rivalry, like you said, kind of was falling a little bit because both teams weren't as competitive. But now with the way that the Red Sox are playing, I think Yankees fans are actually like, wow, the Red Sox are surprising us this year. They're a good team, and that offense is tough to beat. And we've all seen that. I mean, they can rip apart some good pitching too. So I think that the Yankees fans are now more aware of that. And from their perspective, they're like, yeah, that's only going to make things more fun this year. And I think those series against the Yankees, and I was annoyed when the season started or when the schedule even came out, when I saw that they weren't playing the Yankees until June. And I said, I can't believe we have to wait 2 months until they see each other. But that actually from this perspective now is looking pretty good, because now we're seeing that both teams are playing pretty well, and the Yankees had the opportunity to start playing better before going into that series with the Red Sox. And so now it's at the point where they're both fighting for that top spot in the AL East. And it's just going to make things so much more fun when they do play each other. And I think that you're right with Dodgers Padres. That's going to be a fun rivalry to watch all season. I mean, that first series that they played each other this year, that was so fun. And I was like, we get so many more games like this season, that this is going to be fun to watch. And I think Dodgers fans are getting pretty nervous now about the Padres, realizing that they're right there with them. And the Dodgers, who have won the division every year for however long it's been now, 9 years or however many years it's been, something around that the Padres now are knocking on that door. And that's going to be just really fun to watch those matchups the rest of the season too, because that's a real rivalry that's coming at us quickly, I think.
Yeah, it's good for baseball. There's no doubt about it. East Coast, West Coast. I mean, the last couple of years, frankly, I'll say it, whenever there's Red Sox, Yankees on Sunday Night Baseball, the last couple of seasons, I was like, it's just for ratings. It's not because both teams are super competitive. It's just for ratings. Now, both teams are extremely competitive. Right at the top of the division, I'm actually looking forward to those two games. So you're allowed on. I'm giving you permission to put Yankees Red Sox back on Sunday Night Baseball.
Yeah, good. I mean, it seems like the Braves are on Sunday Night Baseball every other week. So
yeah, they are on there.
It'd be nice to see some different teams on it, because it seems like it's always them for some reason.
It's A-Rod's fault.
Yeah, I'm gonna blame A-Rod for that one, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess just kind of quickly before we wrap things up, what do you think of the extra innings rule? Because that is still controversial among baseball fans, and I know some people are warming up to the whole runner on second base thing now, and some people still don't like it. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that rule as a whole.
I was supportive of it right from the start, personally, because I know every game matters to every fan, but to me, going 18, 19 innings in a random game in July is not good for, one, the health. This season, we're already seeing injuries skyrocket. All of a sudden, you throw some 18, 19 inning games in there, you're going to have to use your bullpen more. You're going to have to throw some position players on the mound. Are they going to get injured while pitching? I mean, there's just so much emergency decision-making that is involved with those long games. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't see a team in October or in September and they just missed the playoffs by a game and they think back and say, oh, well, if we wouldn't have had this stupid extra innings rule, maybe we would have won the division. We wouldn't have finished a game behind. I don't think anybody's thinking that way. I think there's good strategy involved. Everybody's given that runner on second base. There's no advantage that either team's getting. I personally am in favor of it.
Yeah, because there's no excuse you can't really say, if they didn't have that runner on second base, we probably would have won, because it's an even playing field because everybody gets that now. And, I think there were games at the beginning of the season that it didn't seem to even shorten the game, because there were games that you would go and the team would come up in the 10th inning, hit a single and go up by a run, and then the other team would do the exact same thing in the bottom of the inning. And I'm like, how long is this going to go on for? Are they really trying to shorten the game? Because to me, it seems like it's not working. But I'm starting to warm, because I was very against it before the season started. I was very much not in favor of this at all, because I was like, I don't like this. It kind of takes away from a lot of the game. And I think that it's not going to help slow down the game, or it's not going to speed up the game rather at all. But I've warmed up to it a lot more now after watching more and more games with that rule implemented. And because I think that it's just, like you said, it's only May right now. So there's no reason for teams to be playing 14 or 15 innings when there's still over 100 games of baseball left to play this season. I would understand if this is a game where it's in the last week of the regular season and teams are trying to clinch playoff spots or clinch a division with these types of games. But obviously that's not the case right now. And there's still a ton of baseball left to be played. So it's nobody really, I don't think, wants to watch a 14 inning baseball game. And especially for me, being an East Coast person, I don't want to sit and watch a West Coast baseball game that's going to end at like 3 a.m. my time either. Because if I want to watch the end of, I mean, some of those Dodgers Padres games have ended super late, and I stay up for them. But being on the East Coast, those games are tough because they already start late in my time zone. So I don't want to sit here and watch a game that's going to end at 3 a.m.
Yeah, bless you for staying up that late to watch those games. Yeah, I think it's, for me, it's less about the speed of the game. It's more about keeping guys healthy. I think this rule keeps more guys healthy. I think it's better for the health. That's my primary concern. That's why I'm personally in favor of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think at the end of the day, it's necessary. And I think, like you said, the health, especially this early on in the season, it would be just sad if somebody gets injured during extra innings because of that not being in place and kind of playing unnecessary excess baseball in a random game on, May 28th or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So I definitely am warming up to it more now. And I think that it's something that could make, and it's already made games more exciting in a way, just because there's a lot more pressure on pitchers now in extra innings to not give up that run, because you already are starting with somebody in scoring position. So it forces pitchers to pretty much pitch a lights out perfect inning, so I think that that's fun to watch too. So it's going to be interesting, I think, to just see how that all plays out and see if more people warm up to it, because I know people are still very much against it, a lot of people that I'm talking to, but I think overall I'm starting to warm up to it more. So we'll see.
No, there's good strategy involved. I understand the hesitancy, but warm up to it. It's getting good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I very much appreciate you joining me on the show and talking some baseball with me. I think it's going to be a really fun rest of the season, and there's going to be some divisions to really watch, because they could really come down to the wire as the season progresses, and we'll just see who stays healthy and who can maintain this level of baseball. And this is why I love how it's such a long season, because you really never know what's going to happen. You could drop a couple games and still be very much in it, because you can just make up for it later on. So it'll be fun to watch the rest of the season and just see who's there at the end and who's not. But again, I appreciate you joining me, and everybody, I appreciate you tuning into the show every week. I really do say this every single time, but I could not have the success of the show without all of you tuning in. So you know where to find Boston Balling, and just continue to just tune in and share it. And I appreciate everyone, and I'll talk to you all next week. Everyone have a great rest of your week.